Alright. This is it. This is it, mga kamets. Mga minamahal natin. Ayan, tapos na yung FIBA. Wala. Hindi na tayo maka-qualify dahil yun nga, hindi nakalusot yata yung team natin dyan sa qualifiers. Nadali tayo dyan ng Brazil. Kaya sabi ko, hintayin natin muna matapos yung game kasi mahirap mag-concentrate. Tapos marami pa sa mga kasama natin. Of course, ay humahabol din dito. Ako naman, simple lang ang ko dyan eh. Simple lang ang philosophy ko dyan eh. Ang hirap ng sport na yan, ang hirap ng basketball kasi unlike football, alam mo sa football guys, isang goal lang kaya mo, kung kaya mo minsan. Tapos defend ka lang ng whole 90 minutes, pwede ka pa manalo. Kaya actually honest yung football para sa akin na mas friendly talaga sa mga underdogs eh. At more importantly, ayan na naman tayo guys, sasabihin na naman nila, hater si Darian, hater na naman si Kenan. Pero guys, I've been saying this for a very long time. Talagang may inherent bias talagang basketball. Hindi ako ang may inherent bias. May inherent bias ang basketball talaga sa height. At nakita natin yung first game natin laban sa Latvia, and even the second game until na-injure si Kai Soto, we were doing pretty well. May laban tayo, especially dun sa mga showdown ng mga big men. Dito talagang kitang-kita natin guys talaga na yun the moment na nagkaroon ng second half, kasi first half leading pa tayo sa Brazil. Second half guys, pagdating sa nagkaroon ng rotation na dun sa players. Kita natin hindi talaga yung deep bench, yung deep yung bench natin. Ang laki-laki talaga ng Brazil kumpara sa atin. Obviously dun sa first house pinakita natin na kaya natin tapatan ng Brazil. We were ahead of them. Pero third quarter talaga nagkalat tayo. Ilan lang points lang tayo? 6, 7, 8. Habang naka 13 points sila kaagad dun sa third quarter. So yun talagang guys ang frustrating sa akin sa basketball. Talagang kung wala kang maraming big men and all, over time, mahirap i-sustain talaga yan. So all kudos to Gilas Pilipinas for doing fantastic job dun sa first game, even dun sa second game sa Georgia, very narrow defeat. Pero dito talaga nakita natin guys, yung mga bansa na may height talaga, kahit hindi sila kasing galing ng Pilipinas. Although of course Brazil is really good. Kudos to them. Ang hirap talaga. Sa akin naman personally, dahil sanay ako sa football na one goal lang, tapos pwede ka na mag-defensive. Azzurri, Italy, and now France, no? Ito yung mga bansa na notoriously sobrang konti ang goal nila, pero they also don't concede many goals. So they managed to go all the way. So yung France kaya nakaabot ng semifinals ng Euros without with barely scoring a single goal. Like nakailang goal lang ba sila aside from mga penalties and all. 'Di ba? Si Mbappe nga na best player in the world arguably hindi nakascore at all so far. Si Ronaldo din, 'di ba? So I don't know guys. Tapos nakaka-frustrate din kasi nakita natin yung latest development guys na ito pala yung mga coach, yung mga staff behind dun sa magical performance ng Philippine football team natin, nag-resign na lahat, nagsialisan na lahat kasi wala daw support, wala nang investments. Kaya talagang for me, all kudos to Coach Tim Cone. Sabi ko kahapon, Tim Cone for president. Although, of course, technically speaking, dahil naturalized siya, hindi siya pwede tumakbo higher than mayor, I think. Hindi ko na alam kay Bamban Mayor go, pero baka naman, may bakante siya. I was very inspired by his leadership. Yung mga pep talk niya, this is too important, wag kayo mag-slack off. Very, very good coach. Very, very tactical. Pero, there's just so much that tactics and coaching can do kung talagang ang labanan dito, height, ang labanan dito yung wala kang deep bench pagdating sa especially centers. So all kudos kay Ramos, especially kay Sir Fajardo. Alam ko may mga nagalit sa akin, nag-comment, nagtanong ako si Sir Fajardo nandyan pa rin, but wow guys, nakita man natin dun sa championship natin, sa FIBA World Cup and ngayon sa qualifiers, he's really medyo may pagka-LeBron James na talagang going strong pa rin, di ba? Going strong pa rin. Si John Fajardo. So, really kudos. And all respect and support sa Gilas Pilipinas. Pero yun talagang concern. Kasi sa basketball nakaka-stress siya. Kasi back and forth. Minsan 10 points behind, 10 points ahead, pwede pa rin humabol. That's interesting. Pero stressful din siya. Kasi pataas pa baba. Masyado siyang, it vacillates too much. For my taste. Sabi nga nila, ayun ng mga Pilipino daw sa football kasi ang boring daw, kailangan na maraming attention span. Pero at the same time, it favors Kung underdog ka, mag-defensive, counter-offensive strategy ka lang like France ngayon and Azure Italy before, may pag-asa ka pa, di ba? And then of course, height, guys. Tingnan mo naman sa football, yung Japan, Korea, especially Japan, hindi sila matangkat at all. Kayang-kaya nila yung mga top European teams. Germany, Spain, lahat yan natalo nila. Pero of course, Espanya tayo for this Euros. Sa tingin ko talaga best team sila. Batang-bata pa, ang galing pa ng Espanya. So all the way Spain. Although, baka makalusot naman yung England and France as usual. But, having said that, guys, I hope maintindihan ng tao na hindi ako hater or anything like that. At hindi naman ako nagpapanggap na expert ako sa basketball. Pero, kung hindi rin naman kayo expert sa basketball, wag rin na kayo magpanggap na may karapatan kayo na sasabihin sa akin anong kailangan kong gawin or hindi, 'di ba? Pwede pa yung iba diyan, yung internet, medyo mabagal ang internet natin Sorry kung pwede off. Oo. Anyways, guys, transition naman tayo dito sa politika kasi hindi for some reason hindi ko ito nahabol, guys. Dun sa sorry guys, na-dismaya talaga ako sa laro Naiinis ako Kasi ang galing talaga ng Gilas Pilipinas, guys. We were ranked 8 yata of all of the top 10, 15 teams. Back-to-back lang tayo ng Brazil. Nanalo nga tayo ng first half. So, medyo nakakadismaya. Natalo pa natin ng Latvia. Sana magandang showdown ulit sa kanila. Yung Georgia nga, nakalusot lang sila last minute. So, medyo nadismaya ako. So, actually, yung mga sinasabi natin comments about basketball, Gilas, it comes from a point of love and support. And nakakainis naman yung mga ibang kasama natin. Yun ang ayaw ko sa mga ginagawa ng ibang tao. They never want to see the good intention. They always want to see a bad intention behind any post. Sabi ko lang, sana lang hindi lang si Sir Brownlee ang ma-highlight. Sana ma-highlight din yung mga magagaling na ibang players. Kai Soto, si Ramo, si Fajardo, ang dami, di ba? Si Newsom, ang dami natin mga galing na players. So, of course, hindi mo kailangan maging basketball expert kung may nag-iisip ka. Diba? Alam mo naman, kahit hindi ka nagpa-basketball, alam mo naman yung idea sinong best player and then i-highlight mo yung best player. And sabi ko lang, sana, pag minimension na itong bansa ay nakatalo ng isang European country for the very first time since 1960, ganito, ganyan, sana dun sa pinaka main post na yan, hindi lang best player ang lalagay yung mga, some picture of the, top players or yung mga best duo, yung mga Soto, Brownlee, ganun. Kasi, guys, again, of course, Brownlee for me as Filipinos, he can get, and in fairness to the guy, he has done fantastic for the country, his GOAT and all of that. Ako lang kasi iniisip ko yung mga gusto mag-dismiss sa Philippines or dina-down tayo dahil lang daw sa mga, sa mga naturalized or mga PhilAms or PhilShams, minsan dahil lang daw doon tayo magaling. So ako, syempre naiinis akong ganun kasi gusto ko naman ma-highlight naman yung skills ng talagang mga kababayan natin, including yung mga hindi naturalized, right? Although, of course, ang pagiging Pilipino naman, hindi yan sa kulay, hindi yan sa lahi, ganun. Gets ko naman yan, given naman yan, guys. Kaya may naiinis ako, minsan nag-overreact yung mga tao. Masyadong insecure ang mga tao. Ang dali matrigger. Abang inisip ko naman sana, ma-highlight yung lahat ng mga players natin, teamwork natin. At hina-highlight nga natin si Coach Tim Cone, di ba? Kaya sabi ko, Team Cone for President. Because I want everyone to be, to get the kind of deserved recognition. Hindi lang yung top player natin, di ba? Even though, of course, MVP, GOAT level, talaga si Brownlee, and kudos to him, he has done fantastic for Gilas Pilipinas. And maraming salamat, sir. You're doing a fantastic job. So, yun lang. Naiinis lang ako na people just wanna find the worst intentions behind any post. Tapos, sumasaw-saw pa sila sa post ko. Wala ba akong karapatan mag-post? Kung disagree ka. Dampake mo, di ba? Tapos, i-question pa yung, bakit ka nagka-comment dito hanggang politika ka lang? Hello! If my job is to analyze the movement of whole nations, tapos hindi ako pwede mag-comment ng movement ng 10 tao sa isang maliit na korte. I mean, like, you use your logic naman. Again, I'm not saying I'm an expert. I'm just saying, hindi mo kailangan maging expert para magbigay ng decent commentary. I'm also not an expert in football or but I think I have a right to express my opinion about, strategies and all. In fact, mas complicated pang football kasi ang daming players involved. But anyways, going beyond that, balikan natin itong issue na ito. Ito sa Department of Education, obviously, one of the things that we didn't manage to discuss earlier, guys. Ito yung pagbago sa Department of Education. Of course, minention na natin yung lumabas sa Department of Education. At kanina may pinost tayo dyan. Just to be clear, baka na naman mamaya, twist na naman mga trolls yan. Ito pa, Kung sino mga fake news peddler, sino mga mahilig mag-spread ng kung anong fake news dati, sila pa yung, uy, nag-spread ka ng fake news. Yun pa yung mga nagaganon-ganon. Maya naman kayo sa balat nyo. Ilang taon na kayo nag-fake news, tapos magpo-post lang kami ng OBC, satire, humor. Kung di nyo gets ng humor, kung wala kayong level na ganon, huwag na lang kayong ma-comment, baka mapapaya pa kayo. So, ito yung pinost natin kanina. Ito yung nag-party, ano. Pero, dahil maraming nag-ano, ayan, ito. Ayan, ang daming nag-ano Oo, baka naman, diba? Baka naman. So, in fairness naman, I think we're well informed naman na nangyari sa Department of Education, 'di ba? Na medyo umalis na. Medyo galing talaga. 'Di ba parang sobrang kamukha talaga? Akala ko talaga. Sabi ko, sino 'yan? Sobrang kamukha. I mean, obviously hindi siya 'yon, 'di ba? But yung isa nga kamukha ni Supra Si Supra 'di ba? 'Di ba? Talagang ayan, i-check niyo yung pinost na natin 'yan, guys. Itong mga yung mga dating work not so hard pero party harder, yung mga ganun ng vibes, di ba? Alright, now anyway guys, kung seryoso na tayo, kantsawan aside, pag-usapan natin kasi medyo seryosong bagay ito. Now we're talking about education, guys. I mean, this is definitely no joke. At medyo nakakabahala talaga yung situation sa ating bansa. So kung yung iba gusto nila magsayawan, mag-party or something, bahala na sila dyan mag-party. Mahirap naman talaga na trabaho yan No, I mean, the Department of Education is really a big department. It's a tough job. And the stakes are really, really high, guys. Super really high. So talagang maintindihan ko kung if ever, hindi ito, obviously itong mga to ay hindi totoo. Mga comedy yan. Pero yung mga, kahit yung totoong version, kung ganun kagaling din magsayaw at ganun kagaling din mag-relax, maintindihan ko naman kung yan ang pipiliin niyang gawin sa buhay, di ba? But going back to this, guys, meron na tayong new leadership in the Department of Education. And in fairness naman, itong new leadership natin sa Department of Education, I mean, someone who, let's be honest, a huge improvement, right? A huge improvement, no offense, dun sa dating Deped Secretary. I mean, just look at the credentials, look at the training, look at the kind of experience that former Senator Angara had when it comes to dealing with fiscal issues, economic issues, technical issues, finance-related issues, throughout his years and years in Senate and heading different committees na talagang very technical, very resource management intensive, na talagang you have to be on top of the details in your portfolio, no? So in fairness to him, I mean, from my own experience and from my discussions with other people na kilala siya, impressed sila. So it's not just what you see on his CV, it's also, in terms of his handling of different portfolios and committees that he was in charge of all of those years, almost 2 terms, no? Sa Senado. No? So in fairness to him, on that level, we can see a significant jump, significant improvement doon sa leadership ng Department of Education. And I think for everyone, obvious talaga na malaking problema natin sa Department of Education dahil, let's not forget, it's not like Sara lang ang Duterte ang in charge sa Deped. Rodrigo Duterte was our president for 6 years. So, siya yung nag-appoint ng dating leadership ng Deped. Yung administration niya ang nag-oversee, guys, ng Department of Education during the pandemic period. Yung administration ni Digong ang nag-oversee, guys, ng the whole lockdowns of schools and the super bagal and delayed and problematic and uneven reopening of schools as we transition out of the pandemic period. Ang nakakabahala talaga, guys, dito is pag tinignan mo yung education sector natin, sobrang grabe ang lalim ng problema. Kasi if you look at the rankings, whether it's the PISA rankings, which looks at math, sciences, and critical thinking, etc., diba? Second to the last, or last, mga ganyan yung mga rankings natin in recent years. Nakakabahala talaga yan, guys. And I'm not sure there has been any significant improvement in terms of basic education sa Pilipinas. So, this is a serious job. This is a very, very serious job. At kailangan mo ng isang tao na who understands not only policy issues, not only wonky issues, but understands education-related issues, especially basic education-related issues. So, yun lang talaga kailangan natin, guys, na titignan. So, ang question dito is, obviously, if you look at Senator Angara, he's not an education expert per se, right? It's not like the guy has a PhD or whatever in education. And unlike his father, the late Senator Angara, or brother Armin, the former Deped Secretary nung panahon ni Pinoy, I'm not sure he has been in charge of any major university at the top leadership level, diba? So at least in the past, whether it's the late Senator Angara, who was the president of, who was in charge of UP, or whether we're looking at the case of Brother Armin, who was in charge of LaSalle, this senator doesn't bring this to the table. Wait lang ha. Okay, tanggalin ko lang itong mga walang yung to ha. Ayan, alright. Yan, deads na kayo. Yun. Alis. Kaya talaga mga engot na. Ay, sorry, mga ano niyan. So, that's why I'm hoping na sana we'll have some clarity about sinong magiging team niya. So, I'm really hoping na pagdating sa undersecretary and assistant secretary position, or even siguro sa director levels, I really, really look forward to Senator Angara really getting experts on education, especially basic education, right? Or get people na parang Brother Armin level, or people like his late father, who had a lot of experience with dealing with high quality education sector, right? At the leadership level. So I think absolutely there's no question about credentials of Senator Angara himself. I think he's a very accomplished person at a personal level. I think he understands economics and finance issues very well. Pero ang tanong dito is you need education experts. At yun yung naging problema natin sa yung previous administration under Sara, di ba? Na yung mga tao na in charge, puro mga abogado I mean, no offense. I mean, abogado, they're great guys. But, you need people who really know a thing or two about education sector. Especially when ganyan kalala yung situation natin. So it's second to the last rankings. I'm not even talking about math and sciences, no? Medyo tanggap naman natin na may mga weaknesses tayo at saka kahinaan pagdating sa math and sciences. But even in creative thinking, in reading comprehension, hirap na hirap yung mga kabataan natin. Kulela talaga, literally, 'di ba? And then, of course, if you also look at other indicators, so it's not just PISA. Because the thing with PISA rankings is that it usually involves the more developed countries, OECD countries, and then usually they pick some few countries from Asia who tend to always come on top. China, Korea, Japan, mga Shanghai, yung mga ganun, Singapore types. And then now even Vietnam, once top 10, ang Vietnam, number 8 yata siya dun sa PISA ranking sa math yata. But they also get some from Latin America, from Middle East, mga Turkey, Mexico, mga ganun. So usually, this is for the more developed countries plus some key countries around the world. So you can say na it's a very competitive ranking of 80 countries, let's say. But it's not a full global ranking of, let's say, 200 countries. But now if you look at the World Bank ranking, which is much more comprehensive, hindi lang yung mga select countries, OECD essentially plus some few countries. This is global rankings. And if you look at our global assessment, if you look at the World Bank studies, grabe, 9 out of 10 ng mga kabataan natin age 10 ay nahihirapan dun sa basic, functional literacy, essentially. And this rating is way worse than even India and Indonesia, which are also, pretty, relatively poor countries with also, difficulties in their education sector. Pero basic education, of course, yung mga top university of India, yung mga IITs are the best in the world. No question about it. We're talking about basic education here, no? Ang laki din ng agwat sa kanila, from their elite university basic education, medyo malaking agwat. Similar sa Philippines. So you can talk about UP, Ateneo, LaSalle, USC, whatever. But if you talk about basic education, hirap na hirap yung mga kabataan natin at kitang-kita natin dito sa mga rankings natin. So, considering gaano kalalim ang problema pagdating sa sistema ng edukasyon natin, I really hope that Senator Angara will really assemble a top-level team. Sorry if I don't have an information yet sino mga tao na ilalagay niya. But I think as more information comes in, I really hope that he puts the best people in charge na may direct direct experience. Talagang may karanasan sila sa education management or may PhD or background or graduate degree or some sort of specialized training pagdating sa basic education. Yun ang kailangan natin yan. Now, pag tinignan mo yung education sector natin, ang lalim ng problema math, sciences, reading and writing, basic comprehension, creative thinking, halos sa lahat ng mga key indicators of literacy, functional literacy, and education quality, kulela talaga tayo. I mean, this is one area whereby talagang kulela ang Pilipinas. Kasi ako usually, naiinis ako pag masyado natin dinadown yung sarili natin. Because we're not doing as bad on so many levels. I mean, if you look at economic growth, we're actually among the fastest in the world, together with Vietnam and India and Asia at least. You look at other things, we're not too bad. I mean, our top universities are not doing as well as they used to do, pero at least may nakailan tayo sa top 500 in the world, considering how many top universities there are in each country. Imagine that. So there are areas I think we're definitely doing far better than yung stereotype ng sarili natin, yung self-deprecating mga humor or mga perceptions natin. Pero pagdating sa issue na ito, talagang malalim ang problema natin, guys. Yung malalim din ng ugat ng problema. Now, we can have a debate about whether yung K-12 exacerbated this or K-12 was not sufficiently supported by the succeeding administration under Duterte. In fairness naman, during the Duterte administration, the person who was put in charge of the Department of Education was supposed to be someone who had some understanding of education, public administration, among others. But then again, there are many factors kasi ang involved here. And I think there are also some questions about whether the Duterte administration made the necessary follow-throughs or adjustments to make sure that in K-12 adjustments, K-12 reform, or rather revolution under the Aquino administration will really bear fruit. So obviously, medyo sabog, medyo kalat, no? The consolidation in the education sector has not happened. At kami naman na nagtuturo dun sa college level and some of, in my case, I even teach at graduate school level. To be honest, nakakabahala din sa amin yan because many professors, university professors are complaining about, the quality of writing, the quality of just, basic facility of language, yung writing skills, medyo hirap na hirap daw yung mga umaakyat-akyat ngayon. Obviously, kung galing sa mga usual schools na medyo elite, you know what you're gonna get. But you don't measure a country's education quality based on just a few elite universities or elite high schools or elite basic education institutions. You look at the median or the average scores, right? And dun talaga hirap na hirap tayo. We're well behind our peers, like super behind our peers. I think the Indonesia level, for instance, dun sa World Bank is around 50-60%. The same with India. We're like 9 out of 10 kids having some serious problems with the ability to write and read and have some creative thinking. So all of these rankings are just showing how deep the problem is. But as I said, dahil sa sobrang lalim at multidimensional itong problema na ito, it's easy for everyone to make proposals. Now, interestingly, and I think this is where I don't want to make too much out of it, but all I'm saying is, I'm just watching carefully everything, right? Because, I'll be very clear about it. I think when it comes to West Philippine Sea, I think when it comes to dealing with China, I think when it comes to projecting a certain degree of statesmanship, to bring some degree of dignity to our foreign policy and international positioning, I think the current president is not doing too bad. I think on the West Philippine Sea, he has really struck a good balance. We are not going to yield. At the same time, we're open to education. So in fairness, let's give the guy credit where credit is due. On economics, we can have another discussion. Pero let's not forget, we're also talking about the Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and concerns about historical revisionism. If you look at his presidential campaign, if you look at people around him, if you look at vloggers, affiliated to the Marcoses, look at the kind of rhetoric they have, look at the kind of narratives that they have. Hindi nga revisionist Talagang totally di ba? Pinakyaw yung kasaysayan natin. So, when you're looking at that context, although in fairness naman to President BBM himself, once he came to power, he has been far more moderate and cautious than many expected. And actually, nung panahon ng EDSA celebration, at least I think the first one or so nagpadala siya ng flowers, ganyan. So, essentially extending the olive branch. Si Amy Marcos yung medyo di ba? But in fairness to BBM, he has definitely not pushed the kind of a reconstructionist, revisionist approach to our history and our curriculum the way that many of the critics suspected or were expecting or were really fearing. Nevertheless, when you have President Marcos Jr. openly coming out and saying, Philippine history dapat ituro ulit sa mga estudyante, that raised eyebrows. Like, what are we looking at here? Because you're looking at a political appointee and a long-time politician taking over the Department of Education. All due respect to the current Secretary of Education, we saw during the Duterte administration that he's a very pragmatic person. He's not ideological. He's not gonna, fight for a certain, principle or something like that, in a sense that, he's not gonna get into ideological or cultural wars. He doesn't seem to be that kind of guy. He's a much more technocratic kind of guy. So obviously, it's easy for critics or those who are a bit skeptical to think, what is the president exactly referring to? And I think it will be easy also for people to suspect or to wonder if something else is going on. Now, to be fair again, tignan natin yung konteksto ng sinasabi ni Marcos Jr. In fairness to Sonny Angara, he also had some sort of replies recently because some issues, especially itong mga DDS, interestingly, they tried to make some big issue out of some of the things that Marcos was saying recently, to kind of twist it or make something out of it. I mean, that's just incredible, right? Yung mga ka-unit team nila, yung Duterte people, DDS people, who na walang ascendancy, moral ascendancy whatsoever, pagdating sa issue ng demokrasya, human rights, sila pa yung gumagawa ng kung ano-anong hanas dyan. Diba? But nevertheless, obviously, we still have to pay attention here. Just because ayaw natin ng hanas ng mga DDS doesn't mean we're not gonna pay attention to something. We have to do it judiciously and not in the kind of a bitter, partisan, toxic way na ginagawa ng mga naging opposition lang dahil hindi binigyan ng position. Now, obviously, there was one area of concern. Senator Angara responded to some of the criticisms, including dun sa, at least from his perspective, some sort of twisting of what was the president referring to. Because the president had, a number of pointers ukol sa issue na education. As far as Senator Angara himself is concerned, ang pinag-usapan niya dito is, for instance, he had to defend. Immediately nag-tweet siya the other day and sabi niya, yung comment ni Pangulong Marcos dun sa mga kailangan natin na reforma sa education sector was not referring to, making the K-12 a kind of an employment for abroad program, right? A kind of a vocational program. Sabi niya, but he did instruct me to make sure our senior high school grads have the credential and skills to get jobs as government promised a decade ago when we added 2 years to the basic education program. So ang sinasabi niya is, of course, hindi tayo nandito para lang mag-train tayo ng mga tao na pwede natin ipadala, or essentially labor exporting policy. We're not gonna treat our education system as that, because education is more than just vocational. But there has to be a minimum degree, a minimum threshold of training to make sure na just in case ayaw mo na mag-college, you're already employable after 12 years in basic education, and after the 2 years that was added to our basic education, right? So yun yung point na. So immediately you see Angara is trying to make clarification there. But obviously other people are paying attention also to the president making statements ukol sa issue ng kasaysayan, no? So the president said something about the need, no? Trying to find the exact. Okay, so ito yung interview niya sa Patikol Sulu, no? Sabi ni President Marcos na he already met with incoming chief, si Angara, at pinag-usapan nila yung mga concerns nila at mga reforma na kailangan ng gagawin. Pero sabi ni Marcos na there may be, quote, a little bit of policy shift, no, to address dun sa performances ng mga students natin. Very poor performance ng mga students natin dun sa mga international rankings and assessments, no? So ayon kay President Marcos Jr., Deped has so many aspects to it. The one thing I asked of him was to please teach our children Philippine history. So obviously, again, for Marcos to talk about Philippine history, obviously that raises a concern because, again, you have that whole historical revisionism shadow. There are some very interesting works by top Filipino scholars and historians that look at the fact that dalawa yan eh. So yung isang problema is actually vacuum of proper education. So kung alam niyo guys, again, the president, again, just to be fair, President Marcos is saying kailangan yan because for the simple reason that it will make them understand what it means to be a Filipino. This is what our people went through. This is why we act in this way because of our history. That's the one thing I asked of him. No, that's in the curriculum. Ang sinasabi niya, kailangan natin ng more historical grounding and rootedness para siguro may kinalaman din ito sa West Philippine Sea issues, di ba? Para hindi tayo mapapadala doon sa mga makapili, doon sa mga pro-China, doon sa mga kung sino-sino dyan. If you have a basic sense of belonging, kung may respeto ka sa Pilipinas, kung may sense ka, you have a sense of our basic identity as a nation, and what it means to be a nation, to have a basic level of self-respect and dignity and territorial integrity, medyo parang nagkakulang tayo dyan. So there's obviously an aspect of vacuum there, right? There's definitely an aspect of vacuum there. Because if you're not aware, actually guys, yung Philippine history was removed as an independent subject, no, sa ating mga high school, at tinuturo lang siya hanggang sa grade 5 and 6 lang, and then sa kolehiyo, kung magkakolehiyo ka. So kung hindi ka nagkolehiyo, sa grade 5 and 6 lang yung exposure mo sa history. And actually, that's where the second part comes in, because many experts and historians who have looked at our curriculum at the level 5 and 6, sobrang whitewashed daw yung kasaysayan natin. Particularly the martial law period. Alright? Particularly the martial law period. So Marcos, though, is saying that in Deped, under Angara's leadership, will have to, quote, simplify yung basic education curriculum or the K-12 program. Ayon sa kanila, we go back to make sure that everybody understands the basics. There are many students in grade 5 and 6 who still have difficulty reading and understanding what they read. They cannot solve simple mathematics problem. We must go back to the basics. All right? And then obviously there's this aspect of taking care of the teachers financially. They cannot teach properly if they are thinking about their family, so we have to make sure that they are in a good place so that the teachers can concentrate on actual teaching. Now, I agree with this to a certain degree, but I have also kind of a counter argument to that. Based on my interview naman with Senator Gatchalian, which you can also check on YouTube, guys. On one hand, completely agree ako kay President Marcos that we need to take care of our teachers dahil dapat competitive yung pay sa kanila, diba? So that, and competitive yung recruitment. You know, we really get the best of the best to teach our students. And in fact, that's the model in places like Korea. In fact, in Korea, one of the best paid public servants are teachers in public universities. Right? Sobrang well-paid sila. Kaya ang taas ng kalidad ng education nila in Korea. And they know that if you have a strong basic education program, you will have a world-class managerial class, scientists, engineers, among others na sobrang mahalaga for bringing in high-quality investments and building world-class industry and manufacturing sector. So actually, in theory, it makes sense. But interesting, when I talked to Senator Gatchalian, he said, if you look at the overall budget that we have in the education sector, hindi siya ganun kalayo sa Vietnam. So actually, Vietnam spends similar, per capita numbers pagdating sa education, and yet they perform way better than the Philippines. So for instance, yung functional literacy problem sila is 4 times better than us, right? Just around 2 to 3 out of 10 Vietnamese children at the age of 10 have some issues with reading, writing, and basic Philippines is 9 out of 10. So super malayo sila. Sa math and sciences, number 8 ang Vietnam once in PISA. The first time na dinagdag sila dun sa listahan, while the Philippines bottom 2, right? Or bottom 3, if not the worst. So, money is important, but I think it goes more than that. I think it's the training of our teachers. Of course, you need resources for that, but it's not just paying them more. It's also making sure we train them more and we get the best possible people to be our teachers. And at the same time, tinitrain natin silang constantly. You know, good teachers are lifelong learners themselves. This is the same thing we also believe in, in college and graduate school na kahit nagtuturo na kami, I constantly read, I constantly write, I try to produce new social scientific works, etc. Because, the field is moving. You have to improve. You have to innovate. And then you have to learn new things, including vlogging or using ChatGPT or making sure students are not using ChatGPT when they're making their assignments, among other things. So, ang daming aspeto at dimension nito. But, going back to the issue of history, sensitive itong issue na to. Alright? Sensitive talaga yung issue na ito. Okay? Dahil nga, ang concern dito is, baka naman kung saan mapunta itong pagbalik ng history subjects dun sa pagdating sa ating mga high school, no? Beyond level 5 and level 6, grade 5 and grade 6. So I think it's very important to see ano yung mga guardrails na meron tayo dyan na pag binalik na ang history subject, it has to be the good one. It has to be the proper one. It has to be objective one. And please don't give me this thing about the Dilao history, whatever. No, go and read. I mean, make a curriculum based on world-class literature. Based on verified facts. Hindi based on anong nakita mo sa YouTube or anong sinabi sa'yo ng lola mo or ano yung mga sinasabi ng mga ka-solid north natin dyan. No. Based on facts. right? And obviously, when we talk about history, hindi lang dapat martial lang tinitingnan. Dapat titingnan natin kasaysayan natin. Like Rizal, all the way prior to the Espanyol, right? What was the Philippines before it became Philippines? What was the Philippines before the arrival of the Spanish? What does it mean to be a Filipino, right? How does the Philippines relate to other countries? What does it mean to be a Filipino in a globalized world? Lahat ng mga bagay niya. In fairness, I think Leloy has contributed to some textbooks for basic education program, but I think we need way more than that. And I would be very impressed if binalik itong mga history subjects sa level ng high school beyond level 5 and 6 na hindi na walang bahit ng alam mo na alamano, mga ganyan bagay. All right, I would be very impressed. So let's see what's gonna happen there. I'm just saying, yes, completely agree na dapat we have to strengthen yung sense ng history, yung ating edukasyon pagdating sa kasaysayan, but we have to make sure we get that right. Because it's even worse if you give them history and then it's essentially an embellished, legitimized, kunyari academic version of the kind of nonsense and whitewashing that we have seen during election campaign and on YouTube and whatever. So, titignan natin guys, sinong maging in charge, sinong i-appoint ng Department of Education at saka mga other relevant agencies pagdating sa issue ng history. Doon naman sa math and sciences, yung STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, wala naman tayong issue dyan. President Marcos Jr. said we have to simplify the curriculum. We have to go back to make sure that everybody understands the basic. So siguro, to a certain degree, we have to really be open to vernacular, usage of vernacular to explain mathematics, to explain science. Kasi napansin ko, mas mahirap na matuto ka ng siyensya or mathematics kung yung ginagamit ng lingwahe hindi mo rin naintindihan. Or you have to learn both the language of instruction and then the content itself. Medyo mahirap siya. So maybe you can teach math and science in vernacular, in Bisaya, in Ilocano, among other things. And then at the same time, you make certain adjustments to make sure na yung pagturo ng mga science, engineering, math, mga ganun, ay hindi lang yung pang 20th century, pwede rin pang 21st century. Kasi nasa ibang mundo na tayo. May artificial intelligence na, the job market looks very different. Now semiconductors are more important than ever. So maybe we want to also build more engineers and scientists involved in semiconductor and some of the emerging technologies like quantum communications, 5G, 6G, telecommunications technology, biotech, yung mga ganun. So, there's so much to work on here. And kaya the devil is also in the details. And especially dun sa history part, I hope we get this right. And I hope we fix the problem in the past. Kasi nga, what I wanted to actually emphasize a while ago na hindi ko na nagawa kanina was that nung in-analyze yung limited exposure ng mga estudyante natin sa kasaysayan, sobrang whitewashed. Particularly yung martial law period. Because a lot of people who were teaching high school or were in charge of the curriculum for basic education after EDSA ay may sympathies sa previous administration. And katulad ng pinag-usapan natin with Chel Jokno, Dean Chel Jokno, during the election period, isa ito sa mga problema natin na bakit hindi nag-succeed ang EDSA. It's precisely because while those in Malacanang had to leave, albeit temporarily, as we would see later on, there was no cleanup. In the judiciary, many people, essentially holdovers from the Marcos era, were still there. Whole networks of Marcos loyalist lawyers and firms were still there. And then sa education sector, the same thing. A lot of loyalist people, a lot of people who bought into the Marcos nationalist, anti-Western, medyo digong style na weaponized anti-Westernization to justify authoritarianism. They were into that. So we didn't do our basic assignment in making sure that the limited grade 5 to 6 or even high school level education we were getting was anywhere close to where it should have been in terms of making people understand what kasi I'll be honest, of course it's great if you understand the Philippines prehistory, right? Prior to the arrival of Spanish. Yes, of course, you have to get to know more about Espanol. We have to get to know more about yung mga maling ginawa ng mga Amerikano para hindi lang tayo mga knight in shining armor. No, the US did many horrible things. There were colonial powers in the Philippines. We have to study that part pretty well. I'm just shocked at how little yung mga kababayan natin when it comes, yung pag-intindi ng mga kababayan natin when it comes to US colonial legacy here. Si Digong lang pasikat doon, but again, he did it for political purposes, obviously, to justify his slavish relationship with China. But also, if sa tingin mo, martial law and dictatorship is good, is golden era, then ipso facto, democracy is bad. Right? So, yun yung implication nan eh. So, if you distort actual history ng martial law period, you're effectively distorting and torpedoing our democracy. And guess what? That's already been happening. This is what has been happening over the past 10, 15 years. Dahil sa disinformation online, the last thing you want is disinformation couched as educational curriculum. That's next level disinformation. That's like state propaganda level. And that's what we have to prevent. Again, this is not about being dilawan or anything like I criticize. And you know, tragedy natin is the ones who came after Marcos were also mostly incompetent or worse, right? Well, not necessarily worse, except if it's Digong. But do you get what I'm saying? But we can criticize what happened with the Dilawans, but do not forget what happened in that 21 years. If you make dictatorship look good, you're essentially making sure democracy will never succeed in this country. You need interventions at the very basic education level. Otherwise, it could be too late. On that note, thank you very much mga kameta. Maraming salamat for a fantastic week we had. We had a lot of discussions. Meron tayong RRM, yung favorite Tres Marias discussion nyo. Pinag-usapan natin Team Cone, Gila sa mga others. Medyo nalungkot pa rin tayo sa nangyari. We had Admiral Ong. We had Justice Carpio. We had all sorts of different interviews and discussions. We were hoping to have others, but unfortunately, yung some of the foreign guests natin, yung isa nakasakit, si Sherwin Gatchalian, hindi pa yata pwede, but we hope to get him next week. Ang dami. Pero nevertheless, ang dami natin na cover, and we hope to cover more. And next week, of course, will be very important because God willing, of course, we're moving towards the 8th anniversary of the arbitration award. Actually, 9th, right? 9th anniversary of our arbitration award. So, pag-usapan natin West Philippine Sea. Yes, we have to understand our history, but in proper perspective and based on verified facts, not nonsense. Salamat, God bless, and talk to you soon.